So picture this. You're an adult, you're trying to learn a new language, and you're thinking, am I just doomed to have this foreign accent forever? I mean, we've all heard that kids are basically linguistic sponges, right? But when it comes to us adults, there's this really common assumption that our vocal cords are pretty much set in stone. And, well, science actually backs up that frustrating feeling. For a long time, researchers have noted that second language speech in adults is typically foreign accented. It's totally scientifically normal and quite honestly expected that very few adult learners are ever going to achieve perfectly native-like pronunciation. But does that mean we shouldn't even try? Or maybe the better question is, does it mean we can't be perfectly understood? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating, somewhat dense acoustic study that basically reveals a magic formula for better pronunciation. We're going to unlock the science of accents together and figure out exactly what it actually takes to make yourself clearly understood in a second language. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The pronunciation puzzle. 2. Form, meaning, and feedback. 3. The classroom experiment. 4. Hearing the data. 5. The magic of feedback. And finally, 6. Intelligibility over perfection. Let's dive right in. Section 1. The pronunciation puzzle. Okay, to truly understand how to fix an accent, we need a specific challenge to look at. And linguists have a favorite one, the notorious hurdle for Japanese learners of English trying to distinguish between the R and L sounds. See, the Japanese phonetic system only has 2 approximate sounds. It's basically just a W and a Y sound. It completely lacks the distinct R and L required in English. So because these specific sounds just literally do not exist in the learner's native phonetic map, the English R and L kind of overlap into one really confusing sound. Their brains and mouths just haven't been trained to build a fence between the two. Section 2. Form, meaning, and feedback. So how do teachers actually tackle a deeply ingrained physiological habit like that? Well, researchers have narrowed it down to 2 academic concepts that might just solve this pronunciation puzzle. The first one is called form-focused instruction, or FFI. Simply put, this just means helping a student notice a very specific language feature, the form, while they're actually engaged in a natural conversation, the meaning. So instead of making students sit there doing boring robotic drills all day, you point out the target sound while they're actively debating or talking about something real. Right. And the second concept is corrective feedback, or CF for short. This is when the teacher actively steps in to reformulate or recast a student's mistake right there in real time. Think of it like this. If a student says, "I want to eat some light rice" instead of white rice, the teacher immediately replies, "You want white rice," adding just a little emphasis to show the correct pronunciation, but without totally derailing the flow of the conversation. Section 3. The classroom experiment. Now, researchers really wanted to know which of these methods actually gets results, so they set up the ultimate classroom bake-off to test how these teaching methods perform out in the real world, away from sterile laboratory conditions. They gathered 65 adult intermediate-level Japanese learners of English over in Montreal. These students were put through a 4-hour, highly communicative class entirely focused on debating and public speaking. It was real high-pressure communication. But secretly, the teachers were testing their pronunciation of that tricky R sound the whole time. The absolute key here is how they divided these students up. They split them into 3 groups. The control group, they just did the normal debate class. The FFI-only group did the debate class too, but their materials had the target R words physically highlighted to draw their attention to the form. And finally, the FFI plus CF group got the whole shebang, the debate class, the highlighted materials, and immediate corrective recast from the teacher every single time they messed up an R sound. Section 4. Hearing the data. To figure out who actually won this experiment, we get to dive into the super fascinating world of acoustic analysis. Because how do researchers actually measure a foreign accent scientifically, rather than just relying on, human opinion? They use a spectrogram. It's essentially a visual representation of a sound wave. Scientists can pinpoint the exact start of an English R sound by tracking a specific frequency band called the third formant, or F3. A falling transition, like a line swooping downwards in that F3 frequency, is basically the visual fingerprint of an English R. So what's the magic number we're looking for on that graph? It's 2,230 hertz. To anchor all this abstract science in reality, researchers found that when native English listeners hear an F3 frequency dipping right around 2,230 hertz, their brains immediately register it as a perfectly good, highly intelligible English R. Think of it kind of like tuning an old-school radio dial. If a student produces a sound up at a high 2780 hertz, it's just static. The accent is confusing, and native listeners honestly can't tell if it's an R or an L. But if the student can physically tune their mouth down to hit that 2230 hertz frequency, bam, they catch a perfectly clear, intelligible pronunciation signal. Section 5. The magic of feedback. All right, the students have finished their 4 hours of debate class, and the researchers have run all their speech through the spectrograms. Moment of truth. Which of the 3 teaching methods do you think actually moved the needle? Was just practicing debates enough? Did highlighting the words do the trick? Or did they absolutely need the teacher's active correction? Well, here's the plot twist. The control group, 0 change. The group that got form-focused instruction only, where they were just noticing the highlighted words, 0 change. No way, right? Only the group receiving both form-focused instruction and corrective feedback saw a significant, measurable drop in their F3 frequencies. They moved all the way from a confusing 2,600 hertz down to a super clear 2,300 hertz. The absolute most crucial takeaway of this entire explainer is this. Just noticing a sound or knowing the rule intellectually in your head is completely insufficient on its own. Pronunciation is a physical, physiological action. To trigger real physical improvement in an adult, immediate, negative, corrective evidence from an external source, like a teacher, is absolutely required.
Section 6. Intelligibility over perfection. This scientific data fundamentally redefines what our ultimate goal should be when we're learning a new language, or honestly, any new physical skill. Check this out. The native speaker baseline for an R sound sits all the way down at 1700 hertz. Our successful learners drop their frequency from 2700 down to 2300. Notice how they didn't even reach 1700, but the native listeners still rated that 2300 hertz sound as highly intelligible. This proves, scientifically, that you absolutely do not need to sound native to be perfectly understood.
So, let's wrap this up with our key takeaways. First, despite all those myths, adult pronunciation can absolutely be improved. Second, combining meaningful practice with a strict, immediate feedback loop is the literal magic formula to actually change your physiological habits. And third, we are aiming for the intelligibility sweet spot. We can officially toss out the outdated, frustrating goal of native perfection and replace it with the highly achievable goal of clear communication.
I really want to leave you with this provocative thought. Whether you're learning a language, a musical instrument, or even a new sport, practice alone doesn't make perfect. Corrected practice makes progress. So how will you actively seek out your own corrective feedback loop to master your next complex skill? Definitely something to think about next time you dive into learning something new. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.